Welcome to the Upskill podcast. Very happy to have you here today. I'm with Andy Davies, sitting right in front of me virtually. Welcome onto the Upskill podcast today, Andy.
Thanks very much, Dave. It's great to be here with you today.
Absolutely. I'm really looking forward to learning from you. And the topic for today is leadership for the post-pandemic era. First of all, Andy, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thank you. My day job is as VP of People First in APAC. So I get the amazing job of working in Singapore with some of our fantastic partners, some people that we share connections with as well, Dave. So I get to work in Singapore, helping companies understand what People First is about and helping those companies go out and sell to customers and then support the implementation. And also for MHR, I work in the UK as global enablement lead. So again, I have a team of people that I look after that we again go around the world and help our partners. Yeah. So I truly believe I've got one of the best jobs going.
Absolutely, you do. And also something interesting I learned about you, you had some time at the RAF, the Royal Air Force.
Yeah.
Would you like to just say something about that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I was privileged to serve in the Royal Air Force. I was an officer in the Air Force, got to rank of squadron leader and worked in various different parts, basically did all the different types of HR jobs available in there, including being head of HR at a couple of different places. So yeah, I had a fantastic career, loved every minute of it, and now enjoying my time with MHR just as much. So it's great. I've been incredibly lucky in what I've achieved.
Absolutely. And for you, now you're really focusing on Asia Pacific. How's it going? And how has the pandemic affected you? Positive, both positive and negative, just before we start.
Yeah, it couldn't have probably come at a worse time. We just got our office established, our partnerships established, and we were making roads on various different commercial deals. We were looking to expand out to Indonesia with a new payroll partner as well. So there was a whole host of things happening, and we'd got some fantastic discussions ongoing in Malaysia. So we were hoping to increase our footprint around. And unfortunately, when I came back, and it was literally a couple of days before Chinese New Year, obviously I'd been reading with interest what was happening in Wuhan for the previous couple of months. And it felt like this thing was chasing me into Singapore and then eventually back to Europe, because I came back to Europe meant to be only for 6 weeks before going back again. But of course, in those 6 weeks, it had crossed over and actually got back to the UK. So it in many ways, it really causes a problem. We've obviously had to just slow down some discussions with some partners. We're still working on with our customers, with some leads and everything. But it's just really difficult. And I'm sure that probably the majority of businesses are in that same position. But out of it, you've got to turn and say, well, what can we do? What are the opportunities? We've had some great conversations with people about how our software can actually help customers during pandemics when they want to actually communicate and share information with their employees. So that's the kind of the positive spin on it, really, is that we can still support people from a distance, even 9,000 miles away. We've still been doing implementation. So it's one of those things. You just have to be resilient.
Fantastic. And on that point of in the way that you're speaking to clients, how is that going? What approach do you find is working for you right now? On the positive side of building those and maintaining those relationships. What's working for you?
Yeah, well, we have a fantastic partner network, which is based out of Singapore, and their reach is all across APAC. And the reason why I set up that partnerships is because they already have the contacts, the local knowledge, and the leads. What I'm doing is simply providing them with the technology to then go out and be successful and solve those problems for the customers. So I think very much so that the interpersonal idea of connections and people buy off people, that has never been stronger. The internet, in many ways, for small scale purchases and everything else, people can happily go on and buy things. But really, where you're talking about a relationship, something that's totally trust based for people's HR and payroll records, nothing beats actually the interpersonal relationship.
Fantastic. And in the spirit of this podcast, the Upskill podcast, as you know, I'm based in Vietnam, and
That's right.
Most of my listeners, I suppose, I think about 90% are Vietnamese, and I post on LinkedIn and things like that. So what do you know about Vietnam? Have you been to Vietnam? Do you plan on, expanding into Vietnam?
Yeah, again, one of our shared contacts, Sticks and Tang, is an Untitled advocate for Vietnam and speaks to me all the time about it. I've never been, and even my last trip to Singapore, I was having a conversation about that. I need to just come and come and even just spend a few days to come and see some part of the country. I'm told by myriad of people it's stunning. So yeah, I want to come and visit, Dave, and I'm sorry I've not been there yet, but I promise that I'm trying to work my way there.
Well, absolutely, yeah. It's a very promising place, as you know. Vietnam.
Oh, sure, yeah.
We've had no deaths regarding the pandemic here, and the government has taken very just fantastic measures in protecting the people here, and it really is at the moment of Vietnam. It just seems it's back to its bustling nature. But onto leadership for the post-pandemic era. What do you think has changed in terms of leadership pre and post? What's the biggest shift you've seen in leadership?
Yeah, it's a difficult one, this is, because I think that a lot of people would naturally want to say and kind of list off a whole load of different qualities that are needed by different people and everything. And I think that when you sit down and start to think about what's needed in the post-COVID era, where you get back to pretty simply is that actually you start talking about requirements of leaders. But the biggest single change is about the intensity. And that's the easiest way I can put it, is that whatever you were doing beforehand, you now need to be doing better or more of, and across a wider perspective, because people aren't now sat in an office. So I'd say it's that intensity. That's a simple sort of where I get down to, having spent many hours thinking about this. What leaders really need, though, they needed this in pre-COVID, but now in post-COVID, that intensity of things like authenticity and resilience and honesty and communication, those are the real things that leaders need to concentrate on. Mm-hmm. And the biggest part out of that is a mixture of all of those, right? So if you think about authenticity, resilience, honesty, communication, as a leader, you are in a trusted position by your company, and employees will look to companies for a trusted piece of communication about the situation, about what's happening, what it means for them. And as a leader, you have a responsibility at that point to give out that honest piece of communication when you can, as soon as you can. And again, for any leader, one of the greatest things that they can do is about their ability to deal with ambiguity. And if you've got a leader that can actually sum up those elements together and say to people, look, we're not sure about this, we don't know where it's going to go, but actually this is the positive action we're going to take, and then explain what their plan is, mm-hmm. that is a far more powerful message than mm-hmm. to sit back and say, we don't know, we're going to wait.
Exactly. And what do you say to companies that are, have been or maybe still are taking a wait and see approach? What would be your thoughts on that?
I think it's really dangerous, honestly. I think that there is a time to sit and be a passenger, very, very few times, but I think that's now past. I think in the first week or so, mm-hmm. the time was truly to hunker down and say, right, can we keep our people safe? Just really do the absolute basics. Can we keep people safe? What can we do right now immediately? But then actually to sit and wait for some sort of information to come out about what the plan was globally, nationally, okay? And people had different perspectives on that. But once that kind of moment of the absolute realization that the pandemic is there, once that's passed, then really taking action is the only way forward. if you sit there and be a passenger throughout that, what you're going to do is two things. First of all, you're going to endanger the future of your company. But second of all, you're going to miss opportunities. And the reason being is that whilst you're actually being passive about this, your competitors are not being passive. They are going out. They are actually working out what they're going to do. They are being front-footed and quite probably gaining a competitive advantage on you for when you do return to work.
Interesting. In what ways, perhaps you have some examples, in what ways are companies finding competitive advantages, like you say? Could you give some examples that you're hearing out in the field? What are they doing to push the envelope and to get ahead?
Yeah. So, I mean, a couple of things. First of all, the remote working has really struck everyone. And again, this is a difference about being a passenger, being active. The people that are taking the passenger approach are actually just saying, oh, this is difficult. We don't know how we're going to do it. We just need to get people back. We can't work at home. This is impossible for us. That actually, if your people can work at home and be really productive, and even if you can support them to be even more productive than they were before at work, because now their well-being is different. They're not actually traveling for 2-3 hours a day. All of a sudden, you've started to then reformulate the culture within your company. You've, again, probably gained more productivity. That is then pointing towards a competitive advantage and build on what you've then put in place. And then during COVID-19, start to actually review your recruitment and selection practices. You then get to the point of saying, well, actually, we can now actually go out and recruit from a different pool of people, because whereby before we were simply saying within this 50-60 mile radius, we're recruiting from people. Well, actually now, what about if we go out and say, hey, listen, I'm going to guarantee everybody 3 days a week remote working. The other 2 days are in the office, or even down to 1 day. All of a sudden, then actually you've just increased your recruitment pool. So those are the kind of competitive advantages that people can gain out of this, tapping into new talent that actually until before they've not been able to get to.
That's really interesting. And I see a lot of recruitment people, experts on LinkedIn, struggling to find new talent. There's a lot of that here in Vietnam, everywhere globally, I would say. So how should a company be going about, as you said, tapping into those talent pools that perhaps they may not be aware of? What's your strategy behind that? As how should a leader approach that?
I think very simply, it's about saying, what can we do differently at work? Because what people have been doing up until probably January, February, March time has been what they've been doing for years, what the company's been built on, what they probably themselves put in place over those previous years. And now it's time to really be brave and courageous and say, that's what we did before. It did bring us success. And we absolutely build on that success. But now, what is it in terms of the organisation structures and operations? Are we going to change? And then what talent do we need to support that? And out of that, there will be requirements for different people with different skill sets. Simply saying we just need the same old skill sets again isn't about moving forward. It's about really now taking that. I suppose there is a risk to it. There's a risk to everything in business, though. There is a risk element here to say, this is where we are. This is what we're going to be doing in the future. Maybe during COVID, we've changed our operations. We've even changed the products that we build because of COVID. Is that a short term? Is that a long term? And if it's long term, what else do we need to support that? And for many companies, what they will have started to do is to see how they're going to de-risk their human capital. So many parts of this will have actually realized that through extra automation, they're going to reduce the need for the human capital, i.e. reduce the number of employees. That's reality. That's actually part of the future of work anyway.
That's interesting. Could you just, for the listeners' sake, explain a little bit about de-risk of human capital, what that means exactly?
Yeah, sure. So in simple terms, when we have somebody in an organization, in a factory, in a production line, in some sort of business that's actually conducting a task that is probably a repetitive task, that's probably a process-based task, then many people should be actually saying, what can we do to replace that with some piece of automation? Can we replace that with software? Can we replace that with an extra robot, an extra manufacturing process that actually extracts the human element out of it? And what that does is two things. First of all, it reduces your exposure to human capital risk, i.e., if those people aren't in the business, how do I cope? But more importantly than that, the people that do remain, actually there is an upskilling for them, because now what they become is the owner of that process rather than the doer of a overly repetitive manual task. They become the overseer of probably many parts of that business, many parts of that process that contributes to the one end thing. And again, that comes back to the competitive advantage.
That's really interesting. And if you take Vietnam as a case, as you know, Vietnam has received billions and billions of dollars of recent funding to expand. There's FDI investment now coming into Vietnam, and I'm seeing a lot of industrial parts being bought up, and there's a huge resurgence, I should say, startup companies coming to Vietnam, and it looks like it's becoming a gigantic hub for a lot of companies in Southeast Asia. A lot of news articles just in the last couple of weeks. So what would you say to people in HR listening to this podcast in terms of managing and leading their company, their manufacturing companies, their factories? What do you think they need to focus on right now, looking forward to the next 18 months or so?
Yeah. I think, first of all, again, go back to the very basic is, are the people that are currently there or currently returning to work safe? In terms of different guidelines, all the measures that people have put in place, clearly, Vietnam has done an incredible job with COVID-19. And to have no deaths is just amazing. It's unheard of, probably. So I think the first thing is for people to make sure that what they've got is safe still. And after that, then again, it comes back to what we've talked about, I think, Dave, where look at where we need to be in a year, 2 years, 3 years' time. Actually assess what risk we're facing with current workforce, with current skill shortages as well. Because again, it might be an opportunity to actually change the way we work, whether it is by some sort of automation or whether it is by changes to the working practices, whether it is a higher percentage of remote working. Those are the kind of things that people can start to look at. And for HR folks and leaders, make sure then that contracts are aligned to that as well.
Indeed, and there's been a huge restructuring and new policies coming in for HR. HR has been extremely busy the last 6 months. Let's be honest. One thing I'm noticing here in Vietnam is, on one side, companies are finding it very difficult to attract talent because they aren't able to clearly show that they have career paths available. And there, obviously, as you said, there's a skills gap. And then you mentioned about, companies should be considering automation. But, it's kind of like a double-edged sword. Companies really want to attract and need to attract talent, but at the same time, there's maybe not enough experience and skill available. But on the other hand, it's now becoming the company's prerogative to supply that learning experience. So it's kind of like we're stuck between a rock and a hard place.
That's fair.
What should we do about it?
So let me just go back to one of the things that you said there, which is about the companies providing this learning experience. And I'm really passionate about the fact that individuals are responsible for their own learning. Okay, that's a real fundamental that any employee anywhere in the world, you are responsible for your learning, and you are the one that's got to own it and then actually make the most and capitalize on any opportunities that are given to you. And if people don't believe that, then what they are going to do is they're going to have to accept whatever is then given to them, and that might be not what they want. Okay, so that's where there is a contention there between the employer and the employee. But as an employee, I own my learning. And in terms of the learning that's provided by companies, what people should be focusing on in the immediacy is the skills that they lack, okay, within the company. And if there is, for example, I work with some companies where they have old technology, they have old skills, and they still have a business that relies on that. If that is the case for them, they've got two options. One, they continue to go out and try and find a dwindling pool of people with those skills. That's probably going to cost them more. Or they now start to focus on what can actually replace those old skills and old technology, such that there isn't that reliance. And that's the bit that we've talked about. So as a company, you've got to review what skills you need and review what skills you need in the future. And that's a difficult ask, right? Then that's the holy grail of workforce planning for any organization. But without any effort into that, then people are going to get caught out. And for employees, they should be doing the same personal reflection for themselves and saying, what skills have I got now? What is it that I need for the future? Where is it that I want to be? What jobs do I aspire to do? And not only now, what are the skills for that job, but actually how is work changing that I can put myself in the best position that when an opportunity comes up, I can put my hand up and say, I'd like to have a go at that job because I believe I'm the best person for it.
That's great. That's really, I think that's very, very helpful for the listener to reflect, from an employee perspective, to reflect on their own, as you said, taking learning, being responsible for your own learning.
Yep.
I still see it as a huge upward climb. But I
obviously, yeah.
It's a very interesting space. Once a new hire has been brought into a company, though, what's the next step? What do you think an aspiring company that really wants to invest in their employees, how should they be developing leadership from within the company? Since we're on the topic of leadership,
I think this is where people again have moved on from. So the classic kind of route is that people kind of come out of high school, they go to university, they end up going through some graduation, end up with a graduate scheme, and eventually go back for some sort of MBA at a well-known business school.
Right.
That was the traditional route that people go through. Times have changed that we don't have to go through that same route. I didn't go through that same route. I'm not saying I am the example here, but I know that more and more people are taking a more wide and varied approach to their own development. And I think that for companies wanting to actually grow leadership abilities within their own company, it's not just about actually paying for people to go on an external course. It's more about actually the experiential part of it, and because that's the difficult bit to get. That if you can actually enable people to have different experiences through secondments, through short-term work-based assignments and projects, effectively working with different people in different parts of the business, working on something that normally they wouldn't actually get to be a part of. There is many benefits for that in the project. You get different eyes, you get a different view set, but more important than that, what you're giving people is the opportunity to work and expand their own skills again. Those experiential parts, the secondments, that is the kind of thing that broadens people's horizons and makes them a better leader, because being a really narrowly focused person that specialized so much, when you get to a position of leadership, if you haven't got a wider perspective of the business across finance, across HR, across supply, across operations, across skills, if you haven't got those understandings, it makes it incredibly difficult to be a really credible leader at the top. Fantastic.
That's really valuable information. So for any companies or managers and leaders listening, so you're saying that there's the move away from the traditional model as you laid out, and now it's really important for companies to provide that internal experience, those secondments, which is I guess the listener could understand secondment as like an on-the-job training. Is that
absolutely? I'd suggest that if I'm currently working in marketing and I want to go and spend 6 months working with the sales team, to see how sales work from start to finish, and then come back to marketing at the end of that 6 months. That's what I define as a comment. So it is on the job training. It is on the job experience, sitting with experienced people, shadowing them, going out, trying new skills. It may be that as part of that secondment, I could actually get to give a presentation that I wouldn't normally get to give. So that kind of different, out of my comfort zone, very much so.
Exactly.
But that's where learning occurs.
That's fantastic. So from 2 points of view, from 2 different angles, from the employer perspective, I think this is really valuable that these are the kind of things that they need to start thinking about, in the hiring process and in the onboarding process, to include this kind of thing in that process. But also from the employee perspective, that these are the kind of things that should be on their mind when, going on interviews and reflecting on job opportunities. So thank you very much for that.
And as a candidate who's going to a job interview, actually people should be asking the question about how is it that you're going to support my development? Do you offer internal opportunities from the job training? Can I be part of projects? Can I actually do some job shadowing with people? All of those experiential things, people should feel free and empowered to actually ask those questions at the end of the job interview when given a chance to say, do you have any questions for us? That's absolutely a valid set of questions. And when I've been doing interviews with people and I've been asked that question by the candidate, a smile comes across my face because I love the question. It's a really powerful question, and somebody that asked that, I take from that somebody's committed to their own development, but also has confidence, because actually what they're not asking about is how much am I going to get paid, because quite frankly, they should already know that. It's not actually asking some really basic question that they should know the answer to. That is a really impactful question.
That's fantastic. That's really, really interesting. Let's move on to some skills or, mindsets that is required, skill sets for the listener. The first one that I came across was the buzzword agile. So how can we define agile, and how do you know if you're agile or not, and how can you see if a company, or if you're running a business, at what point do you say, oh, we're agile or not?
I think if I had the answer to that question, I'd probably be a multi-millionaire by now, because so many companies strive towards being an agile company. I think it is a mindset. I think that the first and foremost thing is, have you set your company up to be able to respond to changes in the market, to changes in technology, to be able to react quickly, to take an opportunity. And now, how you do that within the business, and there's various different routes to agile methodologies, and I think that's a trademark term as well, but there's various different ways that you do that. One of the things that I believe for any leader is about the ability to deal with ambiguity. And if you can actually go out and actually talk to people and say, we're not sure what's going to happen, but this is what we're going to do. This is the things we're going to put in place. These are the processes that we're going to use. And this is the even just the tentative approach into something, to test something out, to get a quick win or a quick loss. And losing quickly is actually very powerful as well, right? That actually, if you can go out and do a small scale project that proves or disproves some part of a growth proposal for you, then that puts you in a really strong position to actually commit more resources to it. And that's the kind of agility that people will need in future. They already need it now, but actually they now need it more. Excuse me, because over the last few years, we've seen this increase in globalization. That's one of the sort of key tenets of the future of work, as it's been for the last 10 years. The globalization and mobilization of people, the free movement of people around the world. But we've also had that more increasing free trade. And with that, the more that businesses can actually take control and go out and have a foray into a place that they've never been to before. It might be a different country, might be a different market or a different product, but the sooner that you can go out, test it out, get some feedback from that consumer base in that different area, bring it back, refine it, and keep doing it. At that point, you will have then started to have actually delivered your agility. But never be afraid to stop what you're doing and move to a different direction, because otherwise, you will at that point be dealing with old technology and old products.
And what do you say to companies that are, trying to become agile? As you know, there's a continuous movement to, a more collaborative approach to organizational decision making and hierarchy and things. Being in Vietnam, that's one thing that's really being disrupted due to COVID-19 and the pandemic. In companies having to respond faster and be more flexible in the workplace. What do you say to leaders that are, let's say, in the thick of it right now, and they're now really transitioning from this enormous amount of hierarchy, and what do they need to do in order to support their people to be more agile and to have that mindset?
I think really simply it's about empowerment, and where there is trust shown, where there is empowerment given, that is where actually people start to be able to make those decisions in the immediate moment, okay? Because actually, once that moment's passed, quite possibly that will never come back for people. And as a leader, if you've given the ability to your key people, or even the people right on the ground, to actually make a decision and then support them with that decision, then you will actually, again, start to be able to cascade that agility throughout the organization. But to do that, just to be really clear, it requires bravery and courage from a leader. It's one of the greatest things needed is bravery. And that's not follow me over the top into battle bravery, but actually bravery to give people the freedom to make those decisions. If you can do that, then what that does is that completely transforms your culture. It makes people actually talk about your culture and your business in a very different way than they do maybe competitors. And again, that comes back to some great reviews on Glassdoor, that kind of thing, that then you start to positively affect your recruitment. So it is a very circular thing that those things are linked.
And I was reading that only 10% of leaders are truly agile. Is there a way in which companies can can you train it? Is there a way, is it in providing those secondments that's going to, boost and bolster their leaders? Is it through training?
I love your question, and I smiled at the 10% of leaders are agile, and I'd love to sit down with somebody and have a chat about that, about how they came to that figure and what the measurement was.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not that you could actually measure that properly, so I'm going to take that 10% with a big pinch of salt, if that's okay, Dave.
That's fine.
I think that agility and agile leaders. Thanks. I think we define that in a different way, probably for different markets, different companies, different products. I think there's such a vastness there of how you would pick that up. But let's just try and answer that question a bit. So very simply, with the agility aspect, it comes down to different leaders in different businesses. But one of the things that is true for all businesses and all leaders is that the globalization, the marketplace for people has changed and is changing on a daily basis. And simply saying that we're going to continue to sell our products in the same way that we've always sold them without any change at all is not agile. That is positively dangerous. Okay. There is a requirement for every leader, and I'll come back to defining a leader in a minute because I think that's important. Every leader needs to actually say, what is it we need to be doing? How is it that we need to look at this technological threat, stroke opportunity, and how can we actually use this to our advantage? And that may be that old ways of actually selling things, maybe a physical shop front now for some people are gone. And that's what will come out of COVID-19, that for some businesses, they will simply take the opportunity to say all of our sales and future will be online. And it's how and where we actually sell them online that becomes important. And unless leaders are prepared to actually be that agile and at times rip up their own rule book, then they will struggle. They will get to a point of being overtaken by either substitutes or competition.
Interesting. Yeah, thanks for that. That's yeah, indeed, as you said, the job market is changing very, very quickly, and that leads on into one of my final questions, which is Gen Z and millennials.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
interesting angle on this one as well.
Exactly. They're the future. So what advice do you have for these this demographic in developing leadership skills right now? Moving into the job market, or perhaps they've been in the job market for a few years, and perhaps COVID has really shook them up a bit, and they're really confused what to do and what next steps they have to take. So what's your advice?
Well, one of the first and really simple pieces of advice, Dave, is that when we talk about leaders, we're not just talking about the CEO. Okay, leadership occurs at all levels throughout the organization, and you've got to untie leadership from a title or a pay. Okay, because actually people throughout the organization, even in the most innocuous jobs that you never thought you would turn around and call somebody a leader, actually probably is one of the greatest leaders in the organization. And it's because of their attitude, it's because of actually how they deal with people and the results that they deliver, probably with even minimal resources. That is probably one of the greatest measures of being a leader as well. So, and the reason I say that as my precursor to my answer about the millennials and the Gen Zs is that wherever they find themselves in an organization, they should never actually simply say, I have no leadership responsibilities here. The minute that people have said that, then actually, you haven't, because you've actually taken yourself out of that leadership debate. So first of all, whatever job that you're doing, you should consider yourself and act like a leader, if that's what you want to be. And in terms of actually then supporting your own development, supporting your own progress, and it will be a bit of a difficult time for the next year or two. It will, genuinely.
Yeah, for sure.
But the way that people can stand out is remember that some of the greatest things that these different generations to me have probably got is about being far more curious and far more confident about actually coming forward and talking and asking and being prepared to not simply accept the norm that's given to them. They're asking a really powerful question like, why? Just, can you explain that to me? Why is that the case? Actually will uncover layers of thinking that people just accept is right. But actually, when you scratch underneath the surface, there's no rationale for it at all. So never lose that. Please never lose that. And also just remember that as millennials and Gen Y, the tech, the digital natives that these generations have actually had is far, far more. It's just daily basis. Right?
Mind-boggling. Yeah, really.
It is. It's completely different. And their schooling compared to my schooling, totally worlds apart in terms of the amount of tech that was available to them. So what they will have available to them without even thinking about it or even knowing about it actually is a confidence with technology to go out and do things and find things, to use new apps and use new software that then actually can truly deliver a change in an agile business that probably some of their more, let's call them senior people in the business, won't be prepared to do. So those few things combined, be it curious, the confident, the asking and questioning, and the tech digital natives, those are the key things that they hold that are available to them to be really successful.
Excellent. So, for the listener, these are the things that are going to help them to stand out and to be an asset, during an interview process, to kind of like, talk about these things. This will really, I think, help them to shine during the interview process. Or
hopefully,
and I really like how you said that. Like, no matter if you don't see your job as the need for being for being a leader, that's already that's a place where you don't want to be. You got to take a different approach and ask the whys and challenge the status quo, which can be difficult, very, very difficult at times. But,
it is. It is difficult. I make no odds about that. I would never want to say to somebody that all of that I've just said is really simple to do. All of that takes practice. It takes time. And again, the idea of if you can have these short bursts of experience in different places, it gives you the ability to learn from different people. Over my career, even when I look back at being aged 15, getting my first Saturday job, and I worked with some people there that I'd never get to work with again in my life, in an industry that I've never been back to. How they worked, their values, what they actually saw was important, was completely opposite ends of my value set, right? So it was really intriguing to work with people that I didn't really respect a lot, because actually what they were doing, how they actually acted, is not how I wanted to be. But I learned an incredible amount from them. So everybody that you go to meet, whatever the circumstance, you take something away from them. Preferably take something away that's great, but definitely learn from what people do that's bad, that you never want to be.
That's interesting. That's really interesting. So putting people in situations together with different backgrounds and experiences and things is a great thing, really. And
correct.
Yeah, because,
correct.
And you don't want to go into something with the blinders on.
No.
So that's really.
Yeah, learn something new every day, and I think I've talked a load about this before, and I've done Disrupt HR talks on when was the last time you did something for the first time, and that kind of newness, that creativity, that keeping you doing something different to what other people have been doing. Some people get out of bed in the morning and don't want to do anything different ever.
Yes.
Okay, and again, that is not the mark of a leader. Getting out of bed every morning, challenging yourself. And I work with a fantastic colleague, and he absolutely every day says, I'm getting out of bed to learn something every day. Right? That's his reason for waking up in the morning. And I love things like that. That is a leader.
I'll definitely quote you on that. When was the last time you did something for the first time? Right?
That's it. Please do. And there's I've got a LinkedIn article, Dave. I'll send you the link to it later, and you can put it in the show notes.
Please do. And you also have your own podcast. I've been listening to a couple of episodes. Who should listen to your podcast, if I may ask?
Please, thank you. So the podcast is called Leadership, the Future, and Tea. There's 4 of us that run it, myself, Ian, Hiten, and Deborah, and we want people who, again, are in positions of leadership to actually listen to that, but taking the notion of leadership in its widest possible sense, people as leaders in all across the business, in all different levels. And we want to share some of our thoughts. We've got some special guests on there as well that we've just been recording. And hopefully people will be able to sit there and reflect on some of the things that we talk about. We leave people with some questions to go and answer, to go and challenge themselves, but we also leave people every week with some resources, whether it's books, podcasts, or articles to go away and read.
Fantastic. And you're going to be based in Asia Pacific, and hopefully again.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm just very sorry, Dave, that I'm not actually sat there now. My flight left on Sunday without me.
Oh,
because,
oh dear.
Yeah,
there'll be another one soon, hopefully.
Yeah, there will, but I'm afraid that COVID just defeated me. So I spend probably about half of my time out in Asia Pacific. I absolutely love the area. There's more I've got to go and see. But yes, I'll be back probably in about 8 weeks' time or so, Dave. So if I can get myself to Vietnam during that trip, then we'll make a physical meeting as well.
That's very exciting. And how can people follow you or contact you or get in touch with you? What are your best ways of communication?
Thank you. So probably the best way is through LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn. I'm on there every day. So if people need to get hold of me, please feel free to send a message through there. My articles are on there that people can read as well. But I've also got Twitter as well, which is @mustard1973. And again, we'll hopefully post the links for people as well. But other than that, my email is posted on LinkedIn. It's andy.davies@people-first.com. Please reach out to me. I'd love to have a chat with any of your listeners. And if I can actually expand on what I've said, then more than happy to do so.
It's been an absolute pleasure. I've learned a lot from our conversation today, and I hope the same for the listener. And we'll definitely cross paths in Asia Pacific soon. Thank you so much, Andy, for joining the Upskill podcast, and see you again.
No problem. Thank you very much, Dave. It's great fun. Thank you.